Welcome to Circular Firing Squad. I'm Marty Jensius, a counseling faculty at Kent State University and host for Circular Firing Squad. We've got 6 members, 6 questions, and 6 answers for each question. Questions are generated by each squad member and run from the welcome to the wacky. Let's find out who's with us tonight. Same old squad, all brought back together. The band has been reassembled, so it's roll call time.
All right, let's go. I'm Eric Perry. I'm a clinical faculty member at Southern New Hampshire University and just excited to be back.
Hi, Stephanie here. Doctoral candidate at Kent State University and practicing clinical counselor.
Hi, everyone. It's Gina Martin. I am an assistant professor at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater.
Jenn Cook, associate professor, counselor education and counseling psychology, Marquette University.
Hi, everybody. Elliott Ingersoll. I'm a professor of counseling at Cleveland State University. It's great to be back. I just spent the last 4 weeks in a blanket fort, so this is nice.
Blanket forts don't sound like a bad idea, actually. Just turn the air conditioning up and get under the blanket fort. Eric, you've got the first question.
I do. So my question is, what are your return to school traditions or habits? This question kind of came out of just leaving the store on July 5th and being overrun with back to school time.
I wish I had something more exciting. I've been racking my brain. It's like I get all my new notebooks. I try to assign a color to a class. So I want the notebook color to match the class in my brain. So I don't have to think when I look at the color of the notebook what class that's for. I mean, I could also write the name of the class. It's occurring to me on the notebook. But, I kind of match that up and then I might take notes in that color too. But my brain really does absorb information based on color. And I think coming up with a color for each class that I have was something that I always did at the start of the school year.
For me, I don't know, I struggled a little bit with this question because previously I taught all year round. So there was never really any big break. So I never had any big traditions. This year looks a little different though. So in the fall, I will be celebrating my sister's wedding, moving to a new home, doing 4 class preps. So that's what I will be doing to kick off my fall school traditions this year.
So I feel a little silly saying this at 43 years old, but I always like to buy a new dress for the first day of class for each of my classes. And it's not like I don't have plenty of dresses, I do, but I just always like something fresh and new because it feels like you're starting something new, just like you would do with your new school shoes. I don't usually buy new shoes because I have a hard time buying shoes because I have such big feet. But in terms of a dress, I always buy a new dress. I always also buy a new spiral bound notebook that I use to take handwritten notes throughout the semester. And I know I should just type the notes, but I get so sick of being on screen. And I actually think a whole lot better when I write things down. So those are the 2 that are consistent. Now, ideally, I also go to the grocery store before the semester starts. And I mean, before we go to the crazy meeting week, because then at least I come home and feel like I have everything that I need and don't just eat a bunch of crap or pick up food. And that always just makes me feel horrible. So that's ideal. It doesn't always happen, but new dress and new notebook always does.
I like that. That's nice. Yeah, you alluded, Jen, to the bane of my existence, which was the week of meetings. So my ritual for getting back to fall is stockpiling stimulants. I find that if I start now, I'm usually able to get myself a good supply that'll last me through, last 2 weeks of August, first week of September, and all the inane meetings that we are forced to sit through. But I'd much rather buy a dress myself. So, mine's more of a functionalist kind of response.
Elliott, you stole my dress line. But for me, it's a different it's going to be a different year. We've all been teaching online and at home in our own areas, and I'm beginning to really like it. There's a lot of dread in going back, and I've been saying this. If I would be happy to return to teach my classes, as far to do that face to face, I think it's important. I get the value of it. As far as everything else can much more efficiently be done online in terms of meetings. And I'd rather be sitting in my home with my shoes off instead of around a table with a bunch of other people in a meeting. It just seems like I don't know if we can go back to what it used to be like. Things that signal to me that it's a new semester or a new year. I have a folder on my desktop that stays there through the whole semester that has all my course materials broken into subfolders for different courses. I use that to create documents and put documents on that. When that document goes off my desktop and goes on my file server as storage and a new folder comes up with the new classes, I know I'm in a new year. Along with that, creating the new syllabi and things like that. But I have this tendency to find some new technology or buy some new technology, and it gives me an excuse to use it. It's a new year, so I'm going to do all my notes on my new 12.9-inch iPad, or I'm going to work on the new MacBook Pro that I have, or I'm going to try this new film editing program out and create something for class on it. So for me, it's an excuse to buy new toys.
I mean, it's definitely different. So I'm online primarily all the time, but I teach in person generally every 12 weeks. It hasn't been that way because of COVID, and the university has decided that we're not going to teach in person again until April of 22. So that upsets me a little bit because I haven't had my fix, right? That keeps me sane, to have that contact and to have that experience. I teach skills and group and our advanced skills course almost every term just to have that experience. So it's a little bit different this go around. We have traditions with the kids. My mother-in-law and my mother and everybody fights over who's going to buy school supplies, which is nice because I don't want to buy them. So if there's something to fight over, that's a great one to have. But we generally do like a little trip, a back to school trip. And this year we're going to go to Columbus and go to the Columbus Zoo over a weekend just to kind of celebrate the end of summer. So we always try and do something a little bit special, just the family, the four of us, to just, prepare us to get into the new year.
All right. So my question for this week is there someone in your neighborhood that is just the blank person? So not much is known about them, but maybe their name and their distinguishing quality, which makes them deserving of that community assigned title.
Who are the people in your neighborhood?
I love this question. So I'm a little bit in between houses right now and neighborhoods, therefore. And so I'm going to go with my last neighborhood in Iowa. And we had Brad. Brad was the yard guy. No one ever spoke with Brad, ever, except about lawn advice and lawn care. And when you moved into the neighborhood, you got a visit from Brad telling you that you better keep up your yard. Now, we were first-time homeowners when we moved into this house, and we had moved in January, which any of you who have been in Iowa in January know that you don't know what the status of your yard will look like come May or June. And I heard through other neighbors that Brad, the yard guy, had determined that our home was a lost cause. We had a terrible yard, and it completely looked like a vacant lot because the previous owners didn't care for the yard. So he said we were destined for failure with keeping up our yard. And so Brad, the yard guy, is the one. He had a reputation all the way down the street for being the yard guy, and we failed by his standards. But we did make significant improvements, I'd like to say. So my husband and I, we sat out there with like this yard digging tool, or weed digging tool that Brad actually lent us. He left it at our doorstep one day for all of the dandelions that we had. And we actually broke the tool digging out all of the dandelions that we had to buy Brad another tool. And still to this day, we haven't spoken with Brad except about dandelions. So that's Brad, the yard guy.
Brad, if you're listening tonight, Gina is a winner. So I'm not going for the neighborhood, but I'm going with the folks upstairs. Y'all have heard me talk about my folks upstairs who love their treadmill on the wood floor and love to slam shit, everywhere all the time. Sorry, the filters, we're in summer, So this is not terribly creative, but the Banger Sisters is the first name that comes to mind for them that I use on a regular basis when referring to them. But for the one who likes to stomp around, because one of them doesn't stomp. It's only one. There's two of them up there. Only one of them stomps. Sometimes she's just stompy because, well, that's real creative. But Sir Stomps a lot is also something, even though it's a woman. I mean, I know that this is crazy. I don't know what these people look like. I do not know their names except for the last names that are on their mailboxes. I have zero idea. But, the Banger Sisters, one of whom is Stompy / Sir Stomps-a-lot, is part of my life on a daily basis.
I love that. Having lived in so many apartments, and it was just like, yeah, there's very hard to find some kind of a win-win in those situations. This one I'm going to have to own. I am flower guy to several kids in the neighborhood. There's a gang of kids. You know how neighborhoods go through these phases. Like when our kids were growing up, that was the gang, and there was like 12 of them. And then there were no kids for a couple of years. And now there's this whole new group of 6-year-olds. And yeah, they're normal 6-year-olds. They're out there making lots of noise, running around, running in and out. And they can be a bit mouthy and a bit annoying. So I like to have some fun with them. And I was watering, my partner and I redid the front and ripped out bushes and put in flowers. And I was watering flowers. And this one kid's like, "Hey, those are very nice flowers." I'm like, "Oh, well, thanks. I don't want to frighten you." But half of them emit poisonous spores after sunset. And I can never keep track of which ones do that. So I have to water them all during the day. Anyway, glad you like them. And so now I'm flower guy.
I talk to my sister every week, and I told her just last hour, these are the questions we're working with. And she reminded me, we both went to the same place. As a kid, there was a person at the end of the block that let everything overgrow naturally. This would upset Brad greatly. But it was a yard that was completely overgrown, and the neighborhood referred to her as the witch because she was a recluse, and the house sort of looked like something out of the Munsters series. It was really kind of freaky weird. But I eventually either she moved out or left, and that house got reclaimed, and et cetera, et cetera. But currently I'm dealing with Trump Guy. Trump Guy lives on our cul-de-sac, and he has a Trump sign that was originally on his lawn. And then after the election, it got moved to the front of his house, closer to his house, in the middle of a flower bed. And so it almost looks like Trump is buried there. There are flowers, and it's well manicured. He has a crew cut that's like Hank Hill from King of the Hill. He has a Camaro that he washes and preens over and plays 80s music when he does his yard work so everyone can hear it. Well, of course, in the 80s, they didn't have earbuds, but I wish he'd get some because you can only listen to Journey so many times. With apologies to Elliott, I know it's a Canadian band. He obsesses with his driveway, always blowing it out, and I like to drive past really quickly and kick road dust back up on it. But this is the thing that bothers me the most, flag. And I used to be a Boy Scout. I used to be a Cub Scout. And we learned specifics about how you take care of the flag. He has a flag in his doorway all the time, no matter what the weather is. At night, it's hanging there. It's not lit. These are all sorts of things that you know about if you know how to take care of flags. He also has an illuminated fence that has sort of a flag light system in his backyard. Currently, the flag on his house is hung upside down, which, so it's not with the stars and bars, starfield at the top. It's now he's rearranged it so it's at the bottom, which for those of you who don't know represents country under distress. So Trump guy is the person in my neighborhood.
My story is a little more positive, I think. So from Marty, we have the witch and Trump guy. It sounded to me, read like a horror movie. We have Tiger Mike. So I'm going to tell you about Tiger Mike. My wife grew up in Sharon, Pennsylvania. It's a little town in Western Pennsylvania. We lived there for about 15 years. We bought a house about 3 blocks away from her dad, and her brothers were still young and playing football. And there was a guy that showed up every single game, face paint, Sharon Tigers flag, and he would run up and down the field and just yell, "Get him, get him, get him, get him, get him, get him." And he would do this the entire game. And nobody thought it was, they were used to it. And I was like, is he here all the time? And then I got the story of Tiger Mike. Tiger Mike is actually, he's on Facebook as a public figure now. He's been going to Sharon Tiger football games for 50 years. He's at every single game, never missed a one. He's the super fan of the Sharon High School Tigers football team. And the way these boys take care of him, the way that the team rallies around him, he doesn't sit in the stands anymore. He's on the field, on the sidelines, running with the ball. And every other team in Mercer County, where we live, knows Tiger Mike and has made an exception for Tiger Mike. He's not on staff. He is the guy. He's the guy that everybody knows. And when you see him walking around town, he's always in his gear and very happy to see you. And just one of those staple people that, is always around. And it's fantastic that my favorite part about Tiger Mike is he smiles the entire time, right? He is never happier than when he's at a Sharon Tigers high school football game. So that's Tiger Mike.
I had no idea the answers. And like everybody has somebody or is somebody in their community, which is like really cool. I was worried. But let's see, about 3 years ago, I started running. And although I took a lot of walks around the neighborhood for years before I started running, I never noticed this individual. And I know I would have remembered him. He is Leaf Guy. And he goes around on a razor scooter. I hope I can get through this without laughing. No, I can't. But he has a garbage bag full of leaves and on his razor scooter. And when you pass by, no matter where you are, to anybody that's passing by, he wears branches in his hands. And it's nice. It's really friendly and it's wonderful. But he waves all the branches at anybody who's going by. And I didn't know at first, like, am I supposed, like, I waved back, but like, I didn't know, but I realized just any car that went by, any pedestrian, but just smiling and waves these branches at you. And I think he does work on people's lawns and that's where he gets the leaves and branches, but he's always there with waves and smiles. And, it was just really cool. And I was like talking to Mike and I was like, do you know this guy in our neighborhood? He's like, yeah, see him all the time. And I was like, really? Okay. And then since then, at least twice a week, out and about, I just see him in this general vicinity area. And, it's cool. We have our little exchange and it makes me happy.
Wow, Steph. Well, I think him and Brad would be friends because he takes the branches off of people's yards, and that's a good thing. Brad would be happy. So this next question isn't quite as much fun, but since I'm doing 4 of them, I thought I would ask everyone here, poll the audience, how do you do new course preps? Do you start with the textbook or objectives? Do you start with K-Crep standards? Pick assignments and due dates first? What comes first for you?
Well, I start with the standards because they're always handed to me. I've never gotten to be the person who chose the standards for each of the courses that I teach. They've always been already predetermined. So I get those first, and then hopefully you have enough time. Gina, I hope you've had some time with this. And they haven't just told you must use this book. I do not like being told to use a book. I like to have that freedom to choose a book. Luckily where I work currently, that's cool. And we choose our own books. But the one time I did take someone else's syllabus and someone else's book for a course I had never taught and hadn't prepped before, it was a disaster. And so I am very tedious. I do the table and I line it all up with objectives, both our state objectives, our K-Crep objectives, and our program objectives. And I line it up with each other. And then I line it up with any assignments and things that we're doing in class, because I want it to make sense, because the courses I got the most out of when I was in my master's program were the ones that made sense all the way through. When there were assignments that seemed totally random or disconnected from the topics or from the standards that we were being held accountable to and those types of things, those were the hardest to get through. So, I'm not about reinventing the wheel, but at the same time, I feel like I have to own my syllabi and have them be my own. Otherwise, it's going to be a disaster for the students. It's going to be a disaster for me, and we get to have a big fat disaster together.
A big fat disaster together. That's going to stick in my brain. I'm with you, Jen. So I have to start with what I'm passionate about. That's what turns me on to any course. And then I've got, Elliott brain, all kinds of stuff is just exploding, pouring in, and then I sort. And then as I put the syllabus together, I decide on a textbook, I decide on assignments. And then I work with the objectives as I'm developing the assignments. The very, 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 very last thing I think about is the K-Crep standards, because they change. And K-Crep changes them without doing research on the previous standards to say, oh, well, these were shite. Here's how we're going to fix them. They're just like, nah, we got a new board and they want to make names for themselves. So here's some new standards. It's the least important thing in any part of my workday.
I am a little nuts about course prep. I teach college teaching, which is our initial course for students. Now we have a college teaching prac where they have a series of things they have to learn to do. And one of them is create a syllabus and, which is an essential part of course prep. But the other thing I talk about, and we talk about in that class, is backwards design. So the way I get around having to decide what to do first is to really ask the question, when students leave this course, what do I want them to walk out knowing what to do? More so than what to know. What to know is part of it, but what to do. From there, I can start to think of assignments that will be ways that they can learn what to do. And from there, I can figure out what content they need to know to do the assignments to learn what to do. So I always start with sort of what I think are important on the job outcomes. Now, along the way, hopefully those K-Crep standards weave right into that because, they either fit in the knowledge area or sometimes fit in the outcome area in terms of what it is that we want them to do. So really, if you're thinking comprehensively about that area, and you start with what you want them to walk away being able to do, and work your way back from that using backward design, you can build a course pretty easily. I don't like using other people's syllabi. I will read it to see, mainly to find out what books they're using and look at some of their assignments. But assignments for me are really driven on what I want them to walk out being able to do. And that doesn't necessarily mean being able to write a 20-page APA paper when you're talking about master students who are going to be practicing counselors.
I don't know. I feel like a lot of the time, Jen and I end up wanting to say the same things. Like I tend to be really methodical. I tend to be really detail oriented, have a very distinct process. And I started working with a guy, his name's Jimmy Dowd. He works for Presley Ridge in Pittsburgh. And I was developing courses for the staff and just different things there. And I developed a really great course, and he was hugely just complimentary of it. He was like, "It's fantastic. It's great. I love all the Bloom's taxonomy and just how this fits together, and you meet all the learning objectives, but it's kind of like eating dry toast." And I was like, okay, cool. He's like, "We're just going to throw everything out, and you're going to sit down and think about what would be fun, what would be creative, what's going to inspire you, inspire the learners, just really dig into that." And I've always been kind of jealous of like the creative types, because I didn't think I really had that in me, and really found that the best way for me to build something that I was going to be happy with and wasn't going to turn into a miserable experience for the both of us, myself and my students, was to integrate that first. Like I needed to have something to hang on to that was going to help me frame the rest of the work throughout the course. So I do a lot with experiential learning, particularly in skills-based courses that don't necessarily translate to just direct techniques practice. Things that are going to get them really active and engaged. And I use a lot of media and other courses. So I do a lot of media planning up front. What types of things can I do that convey my message that are going to help them learn and understand things better, particularly in subjects like research, assessment, statistics, those types of things. And honestly, just used a lot of self-deprecating humor when all else fails. So I like to think about the fun things first, like what's going to inspire me to move through this course. And then I find the rest of it so much more enjoyable. The K-CREP standards are helpful. They help frame what it is that needs to be done, I think. But the guiding force behind that for me is to integrate that creativity part.
My answer is going to be all theoretical. I have done one course prep, but it was in the class of college teaching that was referred to earlier. And so I don't know if it's a product of being a student in that class or if it's just kind of how I am anyway, that it's kind of the idea of, what's the objective of the course. So I created, for that class, I created a whole different course that just didn't exist. Some students did a new skills course or theories, but I did this innovations, like counseling innovations course. So I really had the freedom that a lot of people wouldn't have when planning these courses. So I don't know what it's like completely into constraints. I know what K-CREP standards and everything, because that was all included, but not with having the real life situation of this is the textbook that you have to use. This is the syllabus from before, and teach it like that. So that's, I don't know where I would necessarily start with that, but I like starting with just the idea behind the course. And I think for some of those core classes, it is what needs to be taught, what are the objectives of the course, and then hopefully things come into place and the assignments kind of come in last to fit that stuff, I think. But it can be a very concurrent process. At the same time, everything kind of happens. So you kind of have a wishy-washy answer because I haven't done it before.
Yeah. So for me, I don't know. I think I've done it different ways. Like Jen, you mentioned it's going to be a big fat disaster if you take someone else's syllabus and same assignments and everything. And I've walked down that road, and I have no intention to go down that road again. Part of this for me is figuring out what's the overall goal of this course? Where does it fit in the overall program? And I think as I'm transitioning to a new program, I think that's going to be a bigger challenge, because I know Northwestern's program fairly intimately since I went there for my master's and I've taught there for 4 years. So I think that's been my guiding principle before. And now in this context, I think it's going to change. And I think that, I can still have the same overarching goal of like, what purpose do I want this course to serve? What's the main overarching objective that I want these students to walk away with? But I think, pulling on from what Elliott, you had just mentioned too, that I want to start with something I'm passionate about, right? I want to be interested in this, and I want to demonstrate that to my students and show how my passion can also help them as clinicians one day. And so I think starting with those overall goals is important, and then weaving in the assignments from there, and then choosing the textbook, and then the K-CREP standards and all that good stuff, and the timeline and readings and whatever, all that, nitty gritty. But I think for me, it's mainly about like, I'm really, really big on what's the intention behind assignments? What's the intention behind this course? What's the intention behind what we do in class and the readings and that kind of thing? And so I really want that to be clear.
All right, Eric, you're going to get a shot before me because this is my question. All right, so what impact do you think constant electronic surveillance, like phone locators, location locators, grade alerts, nanny cams, the whole nine, has on young people?
Well, I got my brain, Jimmy, has taken a bit of a detour on this one, but I like to think on some level it will normalize sex work. And let me explain where Jimmy went with this, and then, we can kind of go from there. But the idea that one is being constantly surveilled, we find surveillance recordings turning up things that people think are less than flattering, but many times it has to do with their sexual appetites. And many times we're talking about people engaged in consensual, intimate activity, which I think I don't have a problem with that. But then I think that the young people are so used to being surveilled that they become desensitized to this. And then they look at the things that constitute so-called scandals in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. And they're like mind blown about how many of these have to do with just human sexuality. And if we would strip away the taboos on it, then in fact, it would just be something which we already know. We're a randy freaking species, and that's just who we are. And we enjoy sharing those aspects of life with other randy species, it's fine. But then we could just like quit lying about it. And ultimately they'd be like, yeah, why are we, okay, I listened to a podcast about Gary Hart and his fall from grace. And I'm like, wow. I mean, that was nothing compared to the great orange one, or the round orange one, or however we refer to that particular creature. But I'm like, so maybe it's time for a little bit of loosening up of these things. And we would have people who were less sexually frustrated and more satisfied and less hung up about just a lot of the things that people think are scandals. So that's where Jimmy and I went, but I'm not saying that's where other people have to go. But that was our kind of.
I have no way of following that. That is nowhere where my notes are. There's no transition I can do from that to what I'm about to say. So I'll just say it. What impact do you think it's going to have? Absolutely nothing. I think we overproject, just like our parents did, by the way, all these crazy new things the kids are doing. It's going to screw up their life. We start to think, what's going to be damaging based on our own worldview and not based on the people who are living in it. And then we use that excuse. But research shows, just get on the bus, okay? the world and relationships are changing. So maybe the world in the future, people will see, maybe we'll all have a hive mind in the future. I don't know. I'm probably not going to be here by the time it happens. So it goes.
I'm still looking for Jimmy and Randy. I don't see them on my screen. I just, I don't know if we're going to be in the same place on this or not, Jen. I think just because of the kids, I have a little bit of a story, right? So my son, who's 8, is getting picked on by a girl at school. And my daughter, who's 10, decides she's going to stand up for him. So she gets on Kids Messenger and messages this girl and says, you better look out, right? You better leave my brother alone. And she's got 2 of her friends with her, and she's like looking into the camera and she's trying to look tough. And if you've seen her, she's tiny, right? Like she's 10, but she looks 7. She's just a tiny little thing, and she's trying to be tough. And she ends it with, I'm a savage. And then the video ends, right? She doesn't forget that it's Kids Messenger. We see all of this. So we see her going after this girl. And while I appreciate that she's trying to defend her brother, she doesn't have the context to know that he's being picked on because this little girl likes him. It's that kind of thing. This is something that upsets this girl. She's worried, right? She's scared that Lucy's coming for her. I think sometimes it's hard to recognize and remember that the things that you generate and create in a digital space are permanent. There's no getting rid of them. There's no, they can be around and chase you forever. And these things stick. They become something at some point. And we see this all the time. And Elliott talked about it. We see this in the media and the news and the scandal, and a politician dressed like this or did this, and it comes back. And I think it's really hard then for youth to understand how the permanence of these things, right? And the relative damage that it can take, because it's beyond their level of complexity to understand at this point. But they're in these systems nonetheless, right? They have to navigate them. And that's not even talking about the types of surveillance and things that are kind of hovering over them that we don't have overt conversations about. So, I mean, it does concern me. It worries me a little bit, just because I don't know that I have the wherewithal and understanding to help them traverse it as it changes. And I really think I need to try, because that's how I'm going to help them through it. And sometimes it's a give and take. They understand better than I do. I do think it'll have a lasting impact. I do think it's something that we're going to have to understand and know better going forward. I don't think it's necessarily this huge detriment, but I think it does carry some pretty substantial risks. And I worry for the kids and their futures, and what mistakes and the repercussions those can have, amplified into a public space, right? There was a time where you could make a mistake and have a pretty good certainty that it wasn't going to be something that could haunt you 10, 20 years down the road. Now we have to be much more careful about how we act, when we act, and that's despite your developmental stage and where you are in life. So it concerns me some.
I think it's really almost more important what adults or parents do with that information. Looking at that question, I was kind of like, besides it being electronic, I kind of had this growing up, just as far as kind of perhaps being surveyed. It existed before with helicopter parents or people and people where you better call at any time, or I need to know where you are, and so, just switching it to electronic versions. It depends on how the parent is going to react. Are they going to use it to hover? Are they going to use it to make the child feel like they never have any freedom to kind of explore the world on their own? I'm not saying that was like completely my experience. I'm just kind of taking that out, but it's more about being reminded that they're always being watched in certain ways. And that might be more of an impact than the fact of the electronics. I think that there's my first answer to this question was they're going to be used to it. because they grew up with this. But then I was thinking about, it really only turns into a problem if parents are then, with every single grade alert, going back to their child and say, what is this grade about? What's going on over here? Otherwise, it's kind of a normal thing where parents generally know what kind of grades their kids are getting overall. Or are they going to make sure, oh, so you went here after school and you went and got ice cream and then you went to your friend's house and then you came home. And if you say that to your child every night, that's going to have more of an impact than the fact that that information was just available to begin with.
So for my answer, I think I have a little bit of a different spin on this. I work clinically with kids and adolescents, and I have seen some traumas with things on the Snapchat and all of this kind of stuff that even though I'm young-ish, I turned 30 on Tuesday. I can't believe it. I never had the Snapchat before. I never had Facebook until college. I never had any of that kind of stuff. And seeing some of the traumas that these kids have lived through kind of has scarred me for my own child. Because now I'm like, oh my goodness, the things that people can catch on Snap, whatever it's going to be in 10, 15 years. I feel like, I don't know. And the things that are being used, I also work with a lot of like court cases. And so some of the things in court that I'm seeing played out for parents and people and schools, and it can be particularly damaging. So I think that I'm coming at this from a little bit of my clinical upbringing or like my clinical background has scarred me for this, because I think that it does have an effect, and I've seen kids be really hurt by it. I think bullying and that kind of thing has been taken to the next level with some of this kind of stuff. And not even just bullying between kids, but bullying from parents, bullying kids to get back at the other in a messy divorce and this kind of stuff. So I don't know. For me, this question hits hard because I see it on a almost daily basis with the kids and teens that I'm working with. And I think that it's created a lot of problems for them.
I really appreciate everybody's diverse perspectives on this. That's my best summary. The counselor is not in. So one of the things I was thinking about with parents, obviously, who are like peeping on their kids all the time, which, by the way, parents, like, why are you doing that? Like, you were not peeped on unless it was like physically being peeped on, So like, I don't know how y'all have the time, stamina, et cetera, to be sitting there watching your kids' every move. But I'm also thinking about how kids are using it with each other. So like if they have iMessage turned on, for example, they can see if somebody else read their message, and then they're like, you left me on read, and all this kind of stuff, and it's back and forth, and how that kind of is in there too. But the thing that had come to mind for me was like, I don't know about y'all, but like there were no lesser punishments in my house for telling the truth. And so there was a lot of creativity that went on between my friends and me and all of us when we were getting into something, because nobody was tracking a phone, or there's no GPS on your car, all that kind of stuff. And so there was a lot of creativity that we had to have in order to hopefully get away with whatever it is that we pulled. I'm thinking about that and maybe a decrease in creativity. I'm also thinking like, if you want to like track somebody down, go physically track them down. That ability just to get out of the chair and go do it, rather than like, well, let me get my iPad out and see how I can torture someone today. I don't know. I just feel like, and I sound like an old person. I totally get it, but I'm also like, can we get people up out of the chair, get them physical, get them involved, get their minds going? And I'm not saying, this whole kids lying thing is good, but there is like a camaraderie between friends when they come up with the story and, hey, I told my mom I was at your house, have her pick up when you pick up, if she calls, and then you call me over, I'm going to be by Sally instead. And, I don't know. I think people should quit peeking on each other so much electronically and recognizing that there is an imprint that gets stuck, just like Eric's talking about, like with his savage daughter at 10.
That was a good question, actually. That drew out all kinds of perspectives. Mine's a little less weighty, but here you go. What is a movie or show you enjoy as a guilty pleasure?
I guess I get the first response on this, and I'm kind of sidestepping this, but I not really. But I know this will really upset Eric. Musicals. You know, I've got multiple screens here, and when I'm doing email or when I'm moving files around, I've got TCM, and I also have YouTube TV. So if I can't watch it, I'll record it, and then I'll go through the archives and find something in the background to listen to or to have on. And not that I really like Elvis or never really liked Elvis, but TCM was doing like Wednesday nights with Elvis and going through all of his 27 movies. And those were real guilty pleasures. Some of them were so bad, I just turned them off. And with all sorts of racial overtones and all sorts of inappropriate gender kind of sexism in them and things like that. Last week I caught Bye Bye Birdie, which I hadn't seen in like 30 years maybe. And that led to a long discussion between my daughter, who was a doppelganger and does vocal performance teaching, and me about that movie and the differences between it and the Broadway show. But I've got something maybe that could be salvation for Eric, because I know how he feels about musicals. Apple TV Plus now has Smigadoon. And for those who aren't in the know, Smigadoon is put together by Lorne Michaels of Saturday Night Live. And I forget who the director is or the person who's the producer of it. And it's a combination of Broadway Tony stars. So there's good acting, good dancing in it, and comedians. And it is, a couple who has lost their way in terms of their relationship wind up in Smigadoon, which is a takeoff on Brigadoon. But everything is musical and everything is satire in it, which makes it kind of enjoyable for me, and maybe even bearable for Eric.
Oh, I know I deserve that so much. But I'll give you something that might help. So generally for me, it's like really terrible sci-fi, Marvel, DC stuff. I am a self-proclaimed nerd. It's a title that I hold and value. And just recently I was talking with a couple of friends and got me back into watching anime. I haven't watched it in years, and they said they kept bugging me to watch these couple of series, and now I have a Funimation subscription. So I'm starting to work through all this stuff that I haven't watched because I've been off it for such a long time. It is a productivity killer because I can't just like leave it on in the background, so it's definitely something that I'm attentive to. When I need to be attentive to something else, it's generally something I've seen before. But it's really exciting to start to go through and watch new things. And I don't know if anybody else has had this problem, but like the Netflix, Hulu, I just run those services dry over the pandemic. And I ran out of stuff. So I was really excited to find that and find things to be excited about and a group of friends to talk with it about. So just to have that experience has been really cool. So anime is my new thing, new old thing again, I guess.
So I know everybody has heard a billion times about my trash TV, which I really haven't been doing a whole lot of actually lately. I've stopped following a whole lot. I couldn't tell you what's happening on most of those shows, but I was thinking about it, and guilty pleasure now to me is almost like something that I've loved for a long time. And then as I got older and I learned a little bit maybe more about it or saw it in a slightly different way, now I feel guilty that I'll still watch it because there's parts of it, if I think too hard about it, I feel a little icky. But that movie is The Fifth Element, and I love The Fifth Element. It's always been like just this wonderful fantasy adventure, and can't see me, but I'm fighting out. It's just awesome. And I wanted to like embody Lilu and be her for a long, long time. But I think just getting older, I mean, I see lots of different themes in it now that maybe, I hadn't noticed in the same way 20 years ago. And, but I'll look past those, and I'll look past the director, and kind of what I think about maybe some of his work or things overall, even though I do find it completely entertaining. So other movies he's done I've also found entertaining, like Lucy, but yeah, so I'll look past it. I'll feel a little guilty that I still like it, and I like it and I enjoy it so much. So that's my guilty pleasure.
So I had a different answer prepared for this one, because this was too embarrassing and mortifying for me to share. And now that we're here, I feel like I should just go for it. So my partner, Dawn, and I oftentimes will watch our daughter as she's watching her shows, and she'll get really entranced by them. And she'll have like this little face of like, just complete and utter entrancement with the show, whatever she's watching. And we always make fun of her for it. However, the other night she was watching one of her shows, and to be honest with you, I don't even remember the name of it. And I was standing there with my arms crossed, and I didn't even know how much time had passed, that I was completely and utterly entranced by this children's program as well. And Don, who has no emotions, took a photograph of me and my daughter with the exact same expression on our face. He actually took like 5 pictures. And I was absolutely and utterly horrified, not only by the look on my face, but also by the amount of time that I had been completely 100% encapsulated by the show. So that is my guilty pleasure, I guess, is watching children's TV.
You're not going to name it, Gina? Really? You won't name it?
After all that, I don't even remember what it was. I think it was like The King of the East or something like that. It was literally like the most, and we had made several comments on how stupid the show was before he took those pictures. And that was the end.
I understand. If you're sitting and watching it, you want to know how it ends.
You gotta know.
If it's a kid's show and it has a plot, it's a plus. That's really, some of them just don't. But I'm with you, Gina. Don't be embarrassed. I've been there. Been on the floor with blocks waiting to see if Dora made it out or not. I've been there. Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm not really sure this is a guilty pleasure. I mean, I think we've talked about this on the show. You all know this, that I have this thing for old sitcoms, super old, all the way to like Seinfeld old, I mean, I'll run the whole gamut. I mean, and again, this isn't embarrassing or guilty, or that people don't respect it, but like I have watched the Gilmore Girls probably, 6 billion times. In fact, I'm rewatching it with the Spanish dubbed over, because I've been trying to work on my Spanish. And it's really funny, like some of the ways that they interpret some of the phrases, because I can recite every single episode. I mean, there's like 240 episodes or whatever of Gilmore Girls, and I could probably recite them all. I don't know if that's a guilty pleasure because people think that's a baller show. I mean, it is smart, it is fast, it's funny. Maybe everyone doesn't think it's baller, but I'm putting it in the baller category. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say. Maybe I'm just a nerd because I'm watching it dubbed in Spanish. I'm out.
No, fair enough. These are great answers. And for me, it's Baby Einstein DVDs. And if you have kids, you know what a Baby Einstein DVD is. It's a single camera kind of show, and there's puppets and there's all kinds of things. And when our kids got older, my partner's like, I'm going to donate these to the library. I'm like, whoa. I was like, there's like 5 favorites that I want to keep. And I've got them. And so, yeah, late at night, when you remember Carl, when Carl and I are the only ones left up, and I'm like, Carl, let's watch some Baby Einstein. He's like, that sounds great to me. And, we'll put in Turtle Goes to the Beach, and it's just great. That's my guilty pleasure.
Well, my question for tonight, it's our last question. What do you think you'll do when you retire?
Oh, this is easy. As little as possible, I guess. I don't know. I'm someone who enjoys nothing. like doing nothing, being engaged in nothing, having nothing to do, sometimes is my favorite. And I do nothing well. It's something I excel at, and I feel like I could excel at in retirement. I love traveling. I think that's something that'll always be a part of that. When we were just talking about this, Nikki and I, who's been on the show, and kind of like that period in between travel just as much. Like you get home, you unwind, you settle, you have like this week or two period where you feel like you're more appreciative of your house and your things and your place and your comfort. So I kind of like those in between periods just as much. So yeah, a lot of nothing with some running here and there, I think is really what I want to do. Just see things and have that feeling of coming home and appreciating again over and over.
Yeah, I mean, I think that at risk of, I'm copying you, but not in the travel idea, just having the time. When are you going to have the time to take all these trips and maybe, get to cross things off that you just didn't make it to during the first 2/3 of your life? I think just consulting, I can just see still doing some of that, but like on my own schedule and just like when I wanted to, but I don't see ever fully stopping working here and there, doing something in addition to the nothing, but having that little bit of something, I think is just something that's always been there for me. And yeah, even though I think it's different to work when you have the choice and nobody expects you to. So.
When I was thinking about this question, so we're currently in Florida. It is warmer than I ever imagined it could be. And you basically have to swim through the humidity to get anywhere. But truthfully, I don't mind it that much. So I think right now at this moment in time, I would love to come to Florida, like a lot of people, and swim through the humidity and still teach online. I love that. And that's what I'm doing currently. And I think it's a really good setup. So I don't know. I know I'm at the very beginning of my career, but that would be ideal at this point.
Well, Eric, you stole my answer. Big duh there. But I'm going to add two things to it. One, I would like to go back to volunteering, teaching ESL. That was one of the most fun things I've ever done in my life. I absolutely loved it. But I think the other thing is like, while I'm swimming in humidity down there with Gina, because I'm sure that I'll be in Florida swimming in humidity. I plan on becoming shuffleboard queen of whatever trailer park universe I'm retired into, because I went to go see my mom for Mother's Day, and I played shuffleboard for the first time with like her and her, 70+ year old friends. And I was like, this is fun. I was like, why are only retirees playing shuffleboard? Because that is going to be my profession once I retire.
Shuffleboard's great. Oh, it's interesting because my first response to this was, well, pretty much what I'm doing now, but with less teaching and academic writing. But then some of you might have seen this. Canada actually opened up applications for Fulbright scholarships for the first time in a long time, because you usually have to be on a different continent. That was the first thing that got me so fired up. I'm surprised you all couldn't have heard it where you were around the country, because I'm like, no, I'm doing that. I am definitely doing that. So I'm excited about that. But I think, honestly, I would keep writing fiction. And my kind of fiscal goal for a 60th birthday present is another motorcycle. I'm ready to ride again. And I think I can just see myself riding around, writing things down, checking out how people do things in different parts of the continent, and hopefully the northern part of the continent. So that's my answer to that.
Good answers. I'm sort of thinking about this now. And my thinking is, what will I do when I retire? Well, I'm not going to retire. I think things will slow down. Maybe I'll take on less projects. I would like to continue what I'm doing because I find it just completely engaging, and I can't say there are other things in my life that are as passionate as what I'm doing now. I like the technology stuff. I'm enjoying this, what we're doing in the moment, and these kinds of projects. I would probably add to that caveat of not retiring that I would plan to travel a lot more. However, you will never find me in Florida. You can't get me in Florida in the winter, let alone the summer. And you can't, there's nothing there that excites me. Sitting out in the sun and sleeping is painful. It's just, and why would I want to read outside? So travel, but not Florida. So that's it for our questions tonight. We've got one final question, which is our final shot question. The question is, would you rather talk to animals or speak all human languages?
I'm going to say all human languages. I don't know that all the animals have all that much interesting things to say.
No, that was the line of thinking I also took, all human languages.
Okay, so don't hate here, but I'm going to go with animals with one caveat. I want to make sure that they can text me and send me pictures to let me know that they're doing okay when I leave them. Because I've got a special little buddy, Oliver, that he came to Florida with us. The other dog didn't get to come. And so that would be a dream to be able to talk to him.
Y'all, the animal thing just doesn't work with the travel, though. Like, it's not going to help you. So, languages.
Yeah, languages. I switched my Babbel account from Russian to French when I saw the Fulbrights for Canada. I'm like, just in case I end up in Quebec.
Gina, I'm not going to hate on you, but weren't you concerned about parents who are following and tracking their kids too much and the damaging effect that it could have on that? And now you want to inflict some animal with that same type of behavior? To quote David Byrne of Talking Heads, animals are laughing at us. I would really prefer to know every human language. I think and I didn't know how it was going to go tonight. I don't know how people were going to fall on that question, but yeah, it would just be amazing to know every human language. I really don't think animals have that much to say to us. They're already in charge anyways. Thanks to the squad, Elliott, Gina, Stephanie, Jenn, and Eric. Look for some of these characters on their podcasts on the podtalk.net. You can find out more about them at circularfiringsquad.net. Our theme music is from Menage a Quad, Real Swing Shet. That's it for this episode of Circular Firing Squad. Ready, fire, aim.